Hi, this is Paul Gerst from the Balanced Path Wellness Center, and it's time for another episode of On Your Natural Health. I wanted to talk about stressors today. Of course, a lot of health practitioners were always talking about stress and stressors. Um, there's not too much of a difference between stressors and causes of disease, and so I'm going to dive right in. And this list, I'd like to say it's comprehensive. There's always going to be subcategories, and I'll say that this is fairly comprehensive. In fact, if any of you want to chime in on the comment section and throw out some other stressors, either as subcategories of these or things that you think deserve a category on their own, I welcome that. This is kind of something I threw together, something I see a lot in clinic. So the big ones, as I've mentioned, kind of that base of disease from the clinical side, on the natural side, anyways. Any good clinician realizes that we have to get a patient sleeping. So if somebody presents with that's not getting quality sleep, I'll say quality and quantity, they need to be getting adequate sleep. Um, that has to be addressed. And same thing with digestion and elimination. If there's problems with digestion and or elimination, they need to be taken care of. I tend to group those two together. Um, and then hormones need to be relatively in balance. If those things are happening, you have what I would call a treatable patient. But without those things, if you ignore those things, a lot of the things you're treating are going to come back, or especially, of course, when they're the three that I mentioned or four, or underlying your issue. Um, so, a more simple one that people take for granted all the time is not breathing properly. If you're not getting proper oxygenation, and or think of your lungs as a pump. When you're breathing properly, you're taking those deep abdominal breaths. Slow, deep breathing, it helps on a number of different fronts. Physiologically, it helps, like I said, oxygenate our body, and it, as I just mentioned, is like a pump, helps move things around. But when we deep breathe, when we're breathing slowly and deeply, we are more in control of our emotions. Diet and nutrition is a huge one. I've mentioned that in a couple of the past episodes. And it's not just what you're eating, it's what you're not eating. So as I say in Chinese medicine all the time, we're looking at excess and deficiency. What's contributing to the problem? Maybe you have too many damp producing foods, mucus producing foods. Um, um, and from the deficiency side, maybe you're missing out on certain micronutrients. Or macronutrients. Macronutrients being the protein, carbohydrate, fat, micronutrients being vitamins and minerals. Very important, being that our soil, like I said in one of the past episodes, that our soil is devoid of nutrients and our bodies rely on that. We are electrical beings that need those electrolytes, those minerals. Relationships, just talked about that in the last episode. I bet you most of you didn't watch that. It's 15 minutes, and I was told your attention spans are far too short for that. But hopefully, for those of you that were interested in that, you watched it all the way through. Relationship with the self is a big one. Relationship with others, those are, of course, common stressors. The relationship with the self is the one that we most often overlook. Hey, there's nothing wrong with me. I'm dealing with my stuff. We all can use work on ourselves, every single one of us. Some of us might be on top of that and doing the work in truth, and others might be fooling themselves into thinking they're doing the work. Um, Toxins, this could be a very long category. There's all sorts of toxins, chemical pathogens. Our thoughts can be toxic. Um, Thoughts lead to chemical packages in the body. They're chemical expressions. So if you have too much anger, at some point, your liver is going to start showing signs of that anger. trauma, that's pretty self-explanatory. Car accidents, tripping, falling, those kinds of things. But then, of course, the emotional trauma. I think one of the things I'll throw in here is that I think anytime I bring up emotional trauma to somebody who hasn't experienced it on a extreme level, you should say it's not in their conscious thought patterns, meaning they're not actively working on it. Those people tend to be really surprised at the amount of emotional trauma that's going on out there. And I know I, for one, am guilty of this when I'm out in public and I get upset with somebody for driving erratically, or just whose behavior isn't, as I would judge, societally appropriate. I, like everybody else, I'll get upset with that person and not think, hey, maybe they're going through something really difficult now. And so that's something that I'm oftentimes keeping myself in check about, or getting on myself after the fact, sadly. But trauma, both emotional and physical, are common. There's iatrogenic stressors, meaning doctor-caused. And when I say doctor-caused, I don't mean to jump on Western physicians. I mean just anybody who's, that can be acupuncturists, it can be chiropractors, can be anybody. It can be mom giving the kid the wrong medication, over-the-counter medication, or too much of it, or whatever. There's this list is almost exhaustive, and the point is that we can create our own problems. We can think we're helping, and we're doing too much or too little of something. Environment, this is a big one that's often overlooked, sadly. I go into a lot of houses and I can smell fungus or mold, or see it. That's a big one. And negativity. Emotional, like I said, emotional trauma, the environment can be very negative. Kids are like sponges. They absorb all this. And so when when the parents are staying together, sometimes thinking they're doing it for the kids, sometimes they're being selfish. They're bringing their fights, all that stuff in front of the kids. And it doesn't have to be dramatic. It can be just a seething underlying, and kids pick up on that. They're not fools. And from an energetic standpoint, they don't need it. It's not about intelligence. It's about just being around negativity. That can be very damaging. And then I'll finish by saying the time, our like pressure, work. I should be doing this. I should be doing this. Some people drive themselves. I have to have more. I have to have more. I notice the difference between the Midwest, where I'm from, and the coasts are very different. The coastal areas, it's more expensive. People are more leveraged, and they feel like they need to work harder. Maybe sometimes they do. They buy $1 million home and drive a $75,000 car. Yep, you got to pay for it. And so a lot of people are trying to keep up with the Joneses and doing that, and they're working harder and harder and harder, and they forget to live life. And so that's a huge stressor. I see that fair amount in my clinic since moving out here. It's not like I didn't see it in the Midwest, but I see it more here. This is Paul Gerst from the Balanced Path Wellness Center. I want to thank you for listening to another episode of On Your Natural Health. See you next time.